Hi, my name is Nicole Smith, and I am conducting a clinical supervision of a fellow teacher, Ms. Candy McCullers. And this portion of the video is the planning conference. So let's go ahead and talk about your lesson. Candy, who specifically will you be presenting to on Wednesday?
On Wednesday, I'll be presenting to a cohort of our peers. We're all together working on our Master's in Educational Leadership. And so this was kind of different for me because I'm going to be presenting to adults instead of children. But I think that's going to be a good thing. It's going to be a learning process. So that's the class that I'll be teaching on Wednesday.
Okay. What is going to be the topic of your lesson?
My lesson is all about journal writing for teachers and how teachers can journal problems or concerns they have in the classroom and see how those can be addressed, maybe through observation in the classroom or conference with their supervisors.
Do you, whenever you were, I assume, researching this journaling process, how important or what value do you place on journal writing now?
I think it's extremely beneficial if it's used properly. If it's just something that you write down and put in a desk drawer and go on with it, it's not going to be effective at all. But if you truly sit down with your supervisor and reflect on problems or concerns that you're having, then you can work together to figure out how to alleviate those problems or how to make those, a less of an issue in your classroom.
So you're saying that the reflection is the big component of the journaling process.
Absolutely. When you video someone, you can see the outward and what's going on outside, but when you journal, you're getting what's going on inside. You're getting all their feelings and how they think things are going versus their perception versus the actual. So you can kind of work putting those back together to determine how effective they are or things that could change.
All right. So whenever you were doing this planning, tell me, what did you have to do first in this process to prepare for the presentation?
Okay, I started in the textbook that we have, which has lots of good things. It talks about the process of journal writing. It talks about doing a pre-conference, kind of like this, to discuss maybe a topic you want to address. Journal writing takes time. People have to take time to sit down and write. And so, if you have a target, like if it's classroom behavior, then you can start with that target and journal on it for so many days or whatever you determine with your supervisor, and then go back and look at what's happening, and then, even discuss maybe what's happening before or after to cause those behaviors or disruptions. So, find a topic to start with, and then go from there with your journaling. So you don't just have lots of things to filter through. You can get to the heart of the matter, what's causing the problems in the classroom.
That's really interesting. So teachers can use this as a reflection tool on any aspect in their classroom.
Yes, it could be curriculum related, it could be behavior related, it could be anything from bell schedule and not having enough time in your classroom to present the materials that you have. So anything that they are concerned about, just writing it down and making it concrete is something that they can share later. Sometimes when people go to share with their supervisors, they get their opinions and then they kind of remember details, but they kind of don't, and so then they start, I think it was 2 days ago, and I think it was 37 minutes that we had in that period, or whatever the time frame is. But when it's written down, you've got something to work from, and you don't have to work based off your memory, because sometimes when you teach school, you've got 5,000 things going on, and it's not as clear if it's not written down in a journal.
Right. That's really interesting. So what is going to be the flow of your presentation? What are you going to start with and then move on to?
Okay. I'm going to start the lesson by talking about journaling, what journaling is, just like I talked with you, how could we use that as a teacher or supervisor. And then I've got some methods of journaling, not necessarily just paper and pen anymore, but we have different apps that we could share. Everybody's got an iPhone or an iPad or some kind of smartphone in their pocket most of the time. So time takes out the time portion. It can be immediate. You can jot down your facts for the day and move on to the next class period without absorbing quite as much time, because you still want to be effective in your instruction instead of taking all your time to journal as a teacher. Right. And then after that, I'm going to talk about how to analyze that, and then how we as supervisors can use the journal to help our teachers become more effective. And then I want us all to look at a few examples together and discuss openly amongst the class how we can use this specific journal entry, what tools we might use with this teacher to help them become more effective.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You're going to start out with the methods of journaling, talk about some different apps, which I find really interesting. Mm-hmm. I'm excited about that part. And then analyzing, how you would analyze the journaling process. Mm-hmm. and then have a discussion.
Yes.
Okay, what do you think is maybe going to be the part that you focus on the most?
I really feel like the application part with the discussion and looking at the journals entries and trying to figure out how to apply clinical supervision models or techniques to that, and figure out, since we're all going to be supervisors in the future, then we could figure out how to address specific needs based off of what we're seeing from our teachers. Even though we may not be hearing it, we can see it with the.
So the analysis is going to be the big meat of your lesson.
Right. That's what I want for the other educators to take away from them. That it's not just writing. That it's something that they can be considered useful in their classroom. And as supervisors, we can use it as a useful tool to get some insight on what the teachers are feeling or how things are going in their classroom.
Right. That's great. What is your goal or your objective for your lesson?
Like
I think you just stated that.
Like I said, I just want people to be able to have something they can take back with them and use, something they know is not just an extra thing on the list, but they can. It's something they can actually use, and it's something that doesn't necessarily take all the time of the supervisor. It takes time and effort for both parties to become more effective, and I think that that's something that journaling can help. Not necessarily put some of the weight back on the teacher, but let the teacher have some ownership in the process. It's not just you come to my office and I'll tell you what you're doing right or wrong. It's the working together, the collaboration.
Okay. How do you think you will know if your lesson is progressing and that it's hitting the important topics that you want it to?
I think in the discussion portion, when we look at examples of possible entries, that as we get feedback from the participants, we're going to see kind of how they feel about it, if they, how much they were paying attention, how they could utilize those things. So it's kind of going to be a informal assessment, I guess, through discussion,
right,
to make sure that we're all on the same page and we can figure out that how to use journaling effectively.
All right. So your indicators that the lesson is being effective and successful is if the students are able to discuss, are able to think and process of how this can be used, almost like the real world application of journaling.
Yes.
Okay. What kind of strategies do you think you'll use to help or assist their learning?
I want to use the visual strategies. I want to be able for them to be able to see, the bullets and on the PowerPoint presentation about what journaling is, aspects of how to analyze, things like that. I like the thoughts of them being able to see the apps firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
See, I'm going to try to manipulate the apps through the Elmo so that they can see how to use those. I'm going to try to put different strategies in as far as utilizing apps. Some have stylus, some have keyboards. So there's different things. I just want people to know that it's functional, that you can use it, and it doesn't take all your time.
Right.
Because some people think, I don't have time to sit down and write all the things that happen in the day.
Right. Do you have any personal goals during your presentation?
I just hope that I can keep the audience engaged. I want them to be active participants. I want them to learn something that they can use, like I said earlier, and I want them to be able to take something away from this presentation that they can use as future administrators.
Mm-hmm. Those takeaways are really important. How do you think you'll self-evaluate yourself during the lesson to make sure that all of your goals are being met?
Well, I hope that as a teacher I can see if they're on task or engaged visually, and then of course asking questions and monitoring discussion, make sure that everybody's included. I want everybody to be included in discussion. I don't want somebody not to get an opportunity to share or not to have a chance to discuss if they have a situation or concern or something like that.
Right. Okay. Is there any kind of data that you would like for me to collect during your lesson? I know that you've mentioned engagement a lot. Is there anything that you would like me to
maybe we could look at that. Maybe we could look and see if the class is on task, or if they're engaged in the lesson, or if they're bored. I don't want them to be bored. I don't want them to go journaling. Here we go again.
Right.
And think that's something that can be useful and intriguing. I want them to know that this is something that can be vital to them if they use it as a supervisor or as a teacher either.
Okay. I can definitely look at maybe an at-task behavior form or chart. And something that occurred to me while you were talking about the flow of your lesson, what if I mapped out kind of an outline of your lesson, and I think you said that you were going to start out with the methods and then talk about some apps, and then move into the analysis, correct?
Right.
And then the last part was the discussion. So what if I mapped this out right here, if I outlined your lesson and maybe kept the time, like if you spend maybe 10 minutes talking about the different methods, and then I can look and see how many students are engaged here.
Okay.
And then whenever you started talking about the apps, maybe how many students are engaged, because I personally am very excited about that I like, my smartphone and different apps and everything that I can include here. And we'll just see maybe if it's the topic, because you said, journal writing,
Right.
Maybe if it's the topic, or if it's the way that you present the information that holds engagement.
Right. And there may be other portions, like the apps may be something that's more intriguing to the students at that time. They probably think, how many methods can you use of journal writing? Well,
Right.
you just write down what you think. And so there may be a lull here and then more interest here.
Right.
So that sounds really good.
So that way you can maybe see where your peak interest
Right.
occurs during
and then
during
I could
engagement.
also use that to reflect on what I might need to make more exciting next time.
Right. Okay. Is there any other way you think that I could be helpful during this presentation? Anything else to look for?
I think that the behavior is going to be the big thing. I think that engaged discussion is going to be a big topic for me. I want them to know that it's not just something we have to do to mark off our list. I want them to get something that they can use and take home. So I think that just making sure that we're all engaged and we're all seeming to get something based on our discussion at the end will be excellent.
Okay. Well, thank you for meeting with me. I am definitely, like I said earlier, looking forward to this technology component here. I think that's really going to pull in your engagement, that it probably may not be anything to be concerned about. So
Well,
I'm looking forward to it.
Sounds fun.
On Wednesday at probably 1 o'clock.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back for the post-conference today. I'm with Candy, and Candy, you taught your lesson today at about 1:40. Tell me about your presentation. Like, what are your reflective thoughts about the whole process?
Well, I think it went well. I think that I achieved the goal I wanted to as far as instructing on why teacher journals are useful and how they can be useful. I think
Right.
I gave some insight that people may have not thought about before, especially when I said journals reflect the interior person, where videos and things don't reflect the exterior. I think that was a big aha moment for some people. I noticed that they were going, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
So I think that I was effective in teaching them to take it seriously as a technique that could be utilized in a classroom, and so I felt pretty good about it.
Good. I really enjoyed it, and I noticed that aha moment that you were discussing earlier, and also whenever you related it to the fact that journaling allows you to see a teacher's thoughts and feelings. I think that's something that a lot of people had not considered before. So when I was watching, several people were nodding and kind of, it was registering in their head. But I really did enjoy it, and your apps and everything that you had. Did you notice any indicators of success throughout your lesson?
Well, as we were discussing, people were answering questions that I'd asked, and then at the end, when we were talking about possible scenarios, things that might have been written, I was getting some feedback about maybe what the teacher was doing well, that we could tell, maybe what she could use, how she could use some assistance, and then they were giving me some feedback on strategies that we might could utilize based off of the journal entries that the teacher had given us. I felt like they not only were receptive to the journaling, but that they also were able to apply that to the strategies that they already know as a supervisor.
Absolutely. And that was something that you had been a little concerned about, was how everybody was going to respond, if they were going to be on task, they were going to be focused into your lesson, because it was on journaling. And I think that they responded very well. They were very receptive. Here's some data right here. Your goal was to reach all the people who were here to see your lesson. And this data, remember, as we talked about before, it was an at task. So what I did is I looked at each individual student that was here in the classroom, and I timed them every 2 minutes. I looked to see what kind of behaviors they were expressing during your lesson, and I coded it. A right here is that they were at task and the eyes were on the teacher. B is that they were also at task, but their eyes might have been on your handout that you had provided. And then nobody got up and left the room, and nobody was talking unless it was appropriate in a discussion. And then I had also put on here if they were online or on their phone, just not paying attention. And another thing that you had mentioned to me that would be interesting to see is if what their behaviors, if that was reflected in the flow of the lesson, if maybe they were off task because of you were lecturing, or if they were on task because you were showing the apps. So if you look right here at the data, is there anything that stands out to you?
There was a lot of on-task behaviors. There were a lot of the A's with the on-task, with the eyes on the teacher, and several B's that they were actually looking at the information that I had given them on the handout, and not near as much off-task behavior that I don't know, I guess I just assume, not knowing that there might be some off-task behavior,
right.
But it doesn't look very much at all throughout the class.
And I had thought about it too, since it was right after lunch and everything, if people were going to be tired, but as you can see, I mean, this one right here was really the only one that I had to mark for. So how does that make you feel about your lesson?
It makes me feel like I was very effective of keeping them on task, and and just like I said, they seemed to be understanding what I was saying, and of course because they were on task, they were in tune to the lesson.
Right.
So I feel like it was very effective based on the data that we've got.
So I believe what you're saying here is that you were kind of surprised at how many A's there actually were, that eyes on the teacher, like, some of them, it looks like it was basically the whole entire time,
yes,
every time.
All A's. So the majority of I mean, like you said, there's the one student that was off task a couple of times throughout the observation, but for the duration, majority of the students were on task for the duration of the lesson.
And you can also see, what does that kind of say right here whenever I marked those. I know that my lettering got off just a little bit.
Yeah, but when they were talking, they weren't off task. They were participating in the lesson here. So,
yeah. Let's see. How was this data beneficial to you? I know that it said something to you about your lesson, but is there any other ways that you find it to be useful? Would you want anything like this collected again, or?
Oh yeah, and I think that the topic of the lesson may change the data. We talked about that, which of course here you've seen that that the students were on target, on task throughout the duration of this lesson, but I wonder if it would be a different lesson if it would change. So it might be something you could utilize in a different setting.
Right. That's good.
Yes, very informative to know that exactly what's going on, because I didn't realize this person was off task. As a teacher, I probably should have known that, but I missed that, and even though he was off task, he obviously got back on task because it was every other number. So he was still in somewhat in tune with me, as opposed to not paying attention at all.
Right. Okay. Let's see. The data that I collect did help you in reaching your goals and conclusions. Good. Do you think anything else other than this would have been more useful or beneficial?
I'm not sure right now, but I do know that that this is very beneficial to me. I know that the more we learn about other techniques, the more I get intrigued to know how I could utilize that, or what that might look like if I was the teacher teaching a lesson. So, but I do think that the feedback and the hardcore, black and white data is beneficial for every teacher to reflect on, so they can, see what they're doing well and see where they need to make improvements.
So what you're saying is that you did like this and would possibly like for it to be used again in the future, or if you think of another data assessment tool that I could use, that either would be acceptable.
Absolutely. I think this gives me a very good indication of my effectiveness today, my the ability to keep the attention of the students, as well as the fact that they were getting something from the lesson because they were able to respond and answer appropriately throughout the discussion portion
Right.
of the lesson.
Well, other than just this lesson, what do you think you'll take away from this whole experience?
Probably more than anything, that when you have somebody else to take a minute and watch and document, it helps you realize without a doubt what's going on. Sometimes I think that I'm doing something, or I think that I'm not doing something based on what I want to do. So when I have the data in front of me and I can see for myself exactly what happened, there's no doubt. And then if there isn't a concern or an issue, then I can work on making that better so that I don't have those problems in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much for letting me do this pre-conference and post-conference with you and observe your lesson. As I said earlier, those apps, what I had been interested in during our pre-conference and during the lesson, I'm definitely going to have to download a couple of those. They were very interesting, especially I like the Day's Light.
Mm-hmm.
That one really stood out to me because it did kind of appeal to the elementary teachers. So I really enjoyed it, and whenever you look at this, that's kind of what you spent several minutes of your instruction on, and that's when most students, it looks like, were engaged in your lesson. So excellent use of technology there, and I really enjoyed it.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.